My wife of 8 years just told me she has a daughter she gave up for adoption and never mentioned. Now she wants to bring her into our home without my input. I told her no, and she said I was selfish. I, 42 male, had never doubted my marriage before. 8 years with my wife Leah, 38 female, had been nothing short of solid, or so I had believed. We had built a comfortable life together. Weekend dates, quiet evenings, and the mutual understanding that we had both chosen to remain child-free from the very beginning. Leah had been firm about it. She didn't want kids, she wasn't interested in motherhood, and that had been one of the things that made us click. It wasn't just a preference, it was a core part of our relationship, one that shaped our future together, which is why I never expected the bomb she dropped on me that evening. Leah had been acting strange for about a week, distant, distracted, always on her phone. At first I assumed it was work stress. She had been dealing with some big projects at the office and I figured she was just overwhelmed. But then she sat me down at the dinner table with this unreadable expression on her face, the kind that made my stomach twist. She said she had something important to tell me. I expected a confession about work troubles, maybe even something about her family. What I didn't expect was for her to calmly tell me that she had a daughter. I laughed at first. I actually laughed, thinking she was making some bizarre joke. But then I saw the way her eyes darted away and how her fingers twisted in her lap. She wasn't joking. She was serious. She told me that before we met, back when she was much younger, she had gotten pregnant. She had given birth to a daughter and given her up for adoption. She said she had buried that part of her life so deeply that she never thought she'd have to talk about it again. But now, out of nowhere, that daughter had reached out to her, saying she needed help. I sat there frozen, trying to process what I had just heard. 8 years. 8 years of marriage, and she had never told me this. Never once even hinted at it. We had conversations about our childhoods, our past relationships, our fears, our futures, and yet this had never come up. I asked her why she kept it a secret. She sighed, like she was exhausted just from explaining it. She said she had made peace with it years ago, that she thought she would never have to be a mother. But now things were different. Her daughter, her biological daughter, who she had hidden from me all this time, was in trouble, and Leah thought it was only right to step up and be there for her. The way she said it made my stomach churn. I asked her what kind of trouble the girl was in. Leah hesitated just for a second, and that hesitation told me everything. She said the girl, Allie, was struggling. Something about medical issues, financial problems, and a rough upbringing. She gave me a vague rundown, as if she was choosing her words carefully, but I could see where this was going. Leah wasn't just telling me this to inform me. She was telling me this because she had already made up her mind. She wanted to bring Allie into our lives. I stared at her, waiting for the part where she asked how I felt about it. But that part never came. She had already decided. I was just supposed to go along with it. I felt sick. I told her as calmly as I could that this wasn't a small thing, that she had lied to me, whether by omission or otherwise, and that this changed everything. We had built a life together based on what I now realized was a lie. She never told me she had been pregnant before, never told me she had given up a child, and now all of a sudden she expected me to be okay with opening our home to a stranger. Leah's face hardened. She said Allie wasn't a stranger. She was her daughter. I almost laughed again, but there was nothing funny about it. I asked her if she had already spoken to Allie about coming here. She hesitated again, and that was when I knew she had. She had already told Allie she could come, that we would take her in, that we would be there for her. I couldn't even breathe for a moment. This wasn't just a lie of omission. This was manipulation. She had already made promises without consulting me, without even giving me the chance to process any of this. I asked her if she had told Allie about me. She nodded, looking uncomfortable. Said that Allie knew she was married, but that she didn't think it was necessary to tell her I had no idea she existed until now. I ran a hand over my face, feeling like the ground beneath me had just shifted. This wasn't just about a long-lost child. This was about trust. This was about the fact that my wife had made a life-altering decision without me, and now she was expecting me to not just accept it, but embrace it. I told her I needed time. Leah scoffed at that. Time for what? She asked. Time to get used to the idea? Time to decide whether I was going to be selfish or actually support her? Selfish. That word hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't the one who had lied. I wasn't the one who had pretended to be childry for years. I wasn't the one who had made a life-changing decision behind my spouse's back. And yet somehow I was the selfish one for not immediately welcoming this stranger into my home. I told her this wasn't fair. She looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. She said that she thought I'd understand, that I would want to help, that I would support her in this way a good husband should. I stared at her, seeing her in a completely different light for the first time in our marriage. I told her I didn't sign up for this. Her eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite place. Anger? Disappointment? Maybe both. She said she didn't expect me to react this way. I told her I didn't expect to find out my entire marriage had been built on lies. We sat there in silence after that, the weight of everything suffocating. Leah had made her choice. Question was whether I could live with it. And deep down, I already knew the answer. Update 1. The next few days were tense. I barely spoke to Leah, and when I did, it was only out of necessity. The air between us had changed with something unsaid. Every time I looked at her, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. I kept replaying our conversation in my head, trying to make sense of it. 8 years together, and she had never once given me a clue about this part of her past. Not a slip-up, not a hesitant pause, nothing. It wasn't just the lie that got to me. It was the fact that she had already decided everything without me. She had planned to bring this girl into our home, into our lives, without even asking how I felt about it. And now, because I wasn't immediately jumping to support her, I was the bad guy. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Leah, on the other hand, seemed disturbingly at peace with everything. While I was still grappling with the shock, she was moving forward like nothing had changed. She still kissed me goodbye in the morning before heading to work, and still went about her routine like our marriage hadn't just cracked wide open. It was like she had already accepted the outcome, whatever it was going to be. Or maybe she just didn't think I had a choice. Then came the next bombshell. I got home from work one evening and found Leah on the phone, her voice soft and gentle in a way I hadn't heard in a long time. It was the kind of tone people use when they're reassuring someone, promising them something. And then I heard it. She was talking to Allie. She was telling her it would all be okay, that she could count on her, that she had a place to go, and that they would work everything out. I stood there in the doorway, gripping the doorknob so tightly my knuckles turned white. She had already promised Allie that she could stay. Without me. Without a single conversation about it. I didn't even wait for her to finish the call. I walked straight into the room, making my presence known. Leah turned, startled, but her voice didn't falter. She told Allie she had to go and hung up, slipping the phone into her lap like she could somehow hide what she had just done. I asked her how long she had been talking to Allie behind my back. She sighed like she was already exhausted by the conversation and told me she didn't see the point in dragging this out. Allie was coming whether I liked it or not. That was it. No discussion, no attempt to compromise, just a cold, hard fact. I felt something snap inside me. I asked her if she even cared what this meant for us. Leah frowned at me like I was speaking another language. She said she had already explained everything and that she wasn't going to turn her back on her own daughter just because it made things inconvenient for me. I told her this wasn't about inconvenient. This was about trust, about the fact that she had lied to me for 8 years and was now expecting me to go along with a decision I had no say in. She rolled her eyes at that, saying she never lied. She just never told me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I reminded her that we had built a life together on the agreement that we were both child-free, that if she had told me about Allie from the beginning, we would have had a different conversation about our future, that maybe I wouldn't have married someone who had hidden something this massive from me. She shook her head, saying that was ridiculous, that I was being dramatic. I told her I wasn't being dramatic. I was being blindsided. Leah's patience snapped then. She accused me of being selfish, of making her choose between her marriage and her daughter. She said she had thought I was better than this, and that I wouldn't just abandon her when she needed me. Abandon her? Like I was the one who had broken trust. I asked her why she even married me if she always knew there was a chance Allie would come back into her life. Why pretend to be childry when she knew she had a child out there? Leah's face hardened. She said she had truly believed it wouldn't matter, that she had convinced herself Allie would never find her, that she wouldn't have to face it. And then, when Allie did find her, she realized she couldn't turn her away. I told her that was fine. She could be in Allie's life if that's what she wanted, but she wasn't going to make me feel guilty for not wanting the same. She laughed bitterly at that, asking if I was really willing to throw away our marriage over this. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she had no idea how much damage she had already done, no idea that I had already started imagining life without her. I told her I wasn't the one throwing anything away. She was. She had made the choice. She had decided what our life was going to look like without ever considering what I wanted. Leah didn't say anything for a long time after that. Then finally she said Allie would be arriving in a few days. Not if she was coming. When? Like my decision didn't even matter. So I left. Update 2. I didn't go back home that night. I drove around aimlessly for a while, my mind a chaotic mess, before eventually parking in an empty lot outside a 24-hour diner. I sat there in silence, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process everything. The weight of it all was suffocating. Leah had decided without me. She had already made the choice and mapped out our future without caring how I felt. The more I thought about it, the more I realized she never once asked me what I wanted. She just assumed I'd go along with it. I knew then that this wasn't just about Allie. It wasn't just about Leah lying or keeping secrets. It was about the way she saw me, like I was just a background character in her life. I checked my phone. A few missed calls from Leah, a couple of messages asking where I was, but nothing frantic. nothing that suggested she was truly worried. And that stung more than I wanted to admit. After a while, I drove to my friend Mark's place. He opened the door, took one look at me, didn't ask questions, just stepped aside, let me in. I slept on his couch. The next morning, I woke up to more messages from Leah. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even particularly concerned. She just wanted to know when I was coming home. Not if, but when. Like it was a given. Like I would just fall in line. I didn't reply. Instead, I spent the morning talking to Mark, laying everything out. He listened quietly, nodding along, and when I was done, he leaned back and let out a low whistle. Mark told me that if Leah had hidden something this big from me for 8 years, there was no way this was the first time she had controlled things behind my back. He pointed out that she didn't seem to care how I felt, only that I wasn't cooperating. Hearing it from someone else made it worse, made it real. After a long talk, I decided I couldn't avoid home forever. I needed to go back and at least figure out my next move. By the time I walked through the door, Leah was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. She looked up, gave me a once-over, and sighed like I had just come back from some childish tantrum. She asked me if I was done being dramatic. I told her I wasn't being dramatic. I was thinking. She rolled her eyes and said there was nothing to think about. Allie was arriving in 2 days. That was it. I asked her one last time, was this really the life she wanted? Was she really okay with throwing everything away just to play mother to a kid she hadn't raised? Leah's expression didn't change. She just said it wasn't a choice, that Allie needed her. I told her that I needed a wife who respected me. She just shrugged and said she didn't see how the two things were connected. That was it. That was my breaking point. I told her I'd be staying somewhere else for the next few days, that I needed space. Leah waved a hand dismissively and said she'd give me time to calm down. Like this was just a phase, like I'd eventually come crawling back. I left that night and moved into a short-term rental. I told Mark everything, and he just shook his head, saying I deserved better. But it wasn't until the next day that the final straw arrived. Leah sent me a message, a single text. Ally's flight lands at 5 p.m. tomorrow. Hope you'll be home by then. Not a question, not a discussion, a statement, a fact. Like my presence was just expected, like my feelings didn't matter. I stared at the message for a long time before finally replying. I told her I wouldn't be there. I told her I was done. I told her she had made her choice and now I was making mine. Leah didn't reply. She didn't need to because ever since this nightmare started, I finally felt in control again. Update 3. Nothing came. Not a single message, not a call, nothing. At first I thought she was giving me the silent treatment, punishing me for not falling in line. But by the next morning, when there was still radio silence, I knew something was off. Leah wasn't the kind of person who ignored problems. She steamrolled through them. She controlled. She dictated. She made decisions and expected me to follow. So why wasn't she saying anything now? Mark suggested that maybe she thought I was bluffing, that she assumed I'd be home the moment Allie arrived, that I'd break under the weight of guilt and expectation. But I wasn't breaking. Not this time. I spent the day focusing on myself, something I hadn't done in a long time. I went for a walk, grabbed lunch, and even started looking at legal consultations online. I wasn't ready to take that step just yet, but I wanted to be prepared, just in case. By evening, my phone finally buzzed. It was Leah, but it wasn't a message. It was a group call. I let it ring, staring at the screen until it stopped. Then, a few seconds later, a flood of messages came in. Leah was furious. She accused me of embarrassing her, of making her look bad in front of Allie. She said I was being cruel, that she knew I was struggling, but that this was no excuse to abandon her when she needed me most. I didn't respond. A few minutes later, my phone rang again, and this time it was from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, and then another text popped up. It was from Leah again, telling me that Allie wanted to talk to me, that she was hurt by my refusal to be there. I still didn't respond. And then, finally, a message that made my stomach drop. If you don't want to be part of this family, then just say it. That was when I knew Leah had already made her choice. This wasn't a situation where we could find common ground, where we could meet halfway. She had drawn a line in the sand, and if I didn't step over it, I was the villain. But I wasn't going to step over it. I was done. Update 4. I spent the next few days trying to clear my head. I went back to work, kept myself busy, and ignored the occasional messages that trickled in from Leah. Most were passive-aggressive. Some were outright guilt trips. But I was holding my ground. Then, a week after Allie arrived, I got a call from Leah's mother. I picked up. Her voice was unmistakable, sharp, no nonsense. The same tone she had always used when she was trying to fix things. She said she had heard about the situation and wanted to know why I was making such a big deal out of it. I told her I wasn't making a big deal out of anything. I was just responding to the choices Leah had made. She scoffed and said Leah had made those choices because she was being a responsible adult, that Allie was her daughter, no matter how many years had passed. I told her that Leah had lied to me for our entire marriage. She brushed it off and said that it wasn't a lie, just an omission. I asked her if she would have been fine if her own husband had omitted something that huge. She went quiet for a moment, and then sighed and asked what I planned to do. I told her I didn't know yet. She said she hoped I'd come to my senses before I ruined my marriage over one mistake. Then she hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time after that, wondering if I should have said more, if I should have fought back harder. But then I realized something. I wasn't fighting anymore. I wasn't trying to convince anyone of anything. I was just done. That night, Leah finally sent me the message I had been waiting for. Are you coming home or not? That was it. No pretense, no emotional manipulation, just a demand for a final answer. I told her no. Then I turned off my phone and tried to go to sleep. Update 5. I wasn't done yet. There was one last thing I had to do. The next morning, I texted Leah again. This time I was direct. No room for misrepresentation. No wiggle room for her to argue her way out of it. I told her she had 1 week to move out of my house, and if she didn't, I'd move her stuff out for her. She could take Allie and go stay with her parents if she wanted, but as far as I was concerned, I was done playing the role of the accommodating husband. She tried calling immediately. I let it ring. A few minutes later, the messages started. At first, it was disbelief. You're really kicking me out? Seriously? After everything? Then came the bargaining. Can we talk about this first, please? You're making a mistake. Then anger. I gave up everything for this marriage, and you're just throwing it away. You can't just push me out of our home like I'm nothing. She kept calling. I ignored every single one. By midday, I got another message, and this time it was different. I can't believe you'd do this. And then, minutes later, Allie was right about you. That made me pause. Allie? I hadn't spoken to her, hadn't even exchanged a single word with her since she arrived. I had no idea what Leah had told her about me, but it was clear she had painted herself as the victim. I debated whether I should respond, but what was the point? Leah was grasping at straws, trying to guilt me into changing my mind. But I wasn't changing my mind. I had already contacted a divorce lawyer that morning. The paperwork would be drawn up soon. I was done. Update 6. The next few days were blissfully quiet. Leah didn't show up at my office. She didn't bombard me with calls. Maybe she was processing everything. Maybe she was scheming. I didn't care. By the 4th day, I got a text from Mark. You're not going to believe this. Apparently, Leah had reached out to some of my friends, and she was trying to spin the story, telling them I was having some sort of crisis, making impulsive decisions I'd regret. She told them she understood I was hurting, but she forgave me for my outburst, and that she was willing to work things out if I just gave her a chance. Mark didn't buy it. Neither did most of our mutual friends, but a few did. I got a couple of messages from people I hadn't talked to in years, asking if I was okay, if I was sure about what I was doing. That was when I knew Leah wasn't giving up easily. By the 6th day, I decided to check on the house. I hadn't been back since I left, and while I didn't think Leah was the type to destroy things out of spite, I also wasn't taking any chances. When I pulled up to the driveway, her car was still there. So much for moving out. I took a deep breath, walked up to the front door, let myself in. The second I stepped inside, I knew she was home. Leah was in the living room, sitting on the couch, staring at me like she had been expecting. Allie was nowhere in sight. For a second, we just looked at each other. Then, finally, Leah spoke. She said she knew I was angry, that she understood why I was hurt, that she never meant to betray me. I told her none of that mattered anymore. She asked me to sit down so we could talk things through. I told her I wasn't there to talk. I was there to make sure she was packing. Her expression hardened instantly. The fake remorse disappeared, and she crossed her arms and asked if I really thought I could just erase 8 years of marriage over one mistake. I told her it wasn't just one mistake. It was a lifetime of deception. She scoffed and told me I was overreacting, that plenty of people had complicated pasts, that plenty of people made tough choices before they met their spouses. I asked her if she ever planned to tell me. She didn't answer. I asked her if she would have ever mentioned Allie if her daughter hadn't come knocking on her door. Still, no answer. That was all I needed to hear. I told her again. 1 week ended tomorrow. If she wasn't out, I'd move her stuff myself. She stood up then, eyes flashing, and asked if I was really this heartless, if I could really throw her out like she was nothing. I told her I wasn't throwing her out. I was giving her time. She let out a bitter laugh and shook her head. She said I'd regret this, that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I told her the biggest mistake of my life was trusting her. Then I walked out. By the 7th day, Leah was gone. When I came back to the house that evening, the place was eerily quiet. Half of the furniture was missing. Some of the rooms were practically untouched, while others had been picked clean. I checked the bedroom. My closet was exactly as I had left it. Hers was empty. She hadn't left a note, no final message, just silence. For a moment, I just stood there, taking it all in. Then I walked over to the nightstand, pulled out my phone, and sent one last text. The lawyer will be in touch. Then I put my phone away and finally let myself breathe. Update 7. The divorce meeting was supposed to be straightforward, just the usual legal formalities. Asset division, paperwork, signatures. I had prepared myself for it, thinking Leah would treat it like a business transaction. But the moment we sat down in that conference room, I knew she had something else planned. She was dressed carefully, almost like she was trying to remind me of the woman I had once loved. She sat across from me, hands folded neatly, eyes filled with forced regret. I ignored it. The lawyer started going over the document. Leah barely glanced at them before turning to me. She said there was no need for all of this hostility, that we had shared 8 good years together and we didn't have to end things this way. I clenched my jaw, but she kept going. She said she understood why I was upset, but we had both said things in the heat of the moment. Maybe if we both calmed down, we could talk things through like adults. That was it. That was the moment I snapped. Talk things through like adults? I asked her where all this rationality was when I begged her to have a real conversation about this. I asked her why, when I had wanted to talk, she had dismissed me again and again, like my feelings didn't matter. Leah opened her mouth, but I cut her off. I reminded her that when she decided she wanted something, I was just supposed to accept it. No discussion, no compromise, just blind obedience. So now she could do the same. She wanted me to accept Allie? Well, now she could accept the divorce. She should have seen this coming. Her face paled. She started to say something, but I pushed the divorce papers towards her. I told her she wanted to play mother. Fine. She could do that without me. Leah sat there, silent, her hands gripping the papers. Finally, Leah swallowed hard and asked if this was really it, if I was really throwing everything away over one mistake. I told her she had already thrown everything away the moment she lied to me for 8 years, and then, without waiting for another word, I stood up, adjusted my suit, and walked out of the room because I was done, and nothing she could say would change that. Update 8. I found out she was previously married too for a week, which they annulled, but still. I don't know how to feel about all of this. I mean, why? Edit. She wasn't married to Allie's father or mother. I don't know who he is. She isn't getting a penny from me. I followed your advice and ran a background check on. If the woman could hide a kid like nothing, she sure as hell could hide plenty of other things. That's how I found out about her marriage.